Hi everyone, this is Morris from the Fort Lee Public Library. I'm the Head of Collection Development and the Administration Librarian, and today, along with this seasonally appropriate spooky backdrop, I'm going to show you how to make some pasta. So the kind of pasta that I'm going to show you how to make today is slightly different than the pasta you may be familiar with. When you think of fresh pasta, you probably think of the kind that is made with eggs. That's typically the kind that is most commonly found in America and sold as fresh pasta. But what I'm going to show you today is a simpler, more humble version of fresh pasta. That is the kind of pasta that is made traditionally in southern Italy, where my family is from. This is specifically two different kinds of pasta that I'm going to show you today are typical of the region in southern Italy, specifically Puglia, from where my family is from. And this is a kind of pasta that my grandmother showed me how to make a couple of years ago when I was visiting. And it's pretty simple. There's really only 3 ingredients, 2 different kinds of flour and water. And you don't need any kind of special equipment. You don't need machine. Really all you need is your hands and a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. And really that's about it. So the first ingredient is semola, which is something that I find gets a little bit confused, I think, when it comes to translating into English. So sometimes in English you will see semolina, which is not exactly the same thing. Semolina is typically a more coarsely ground flour. Semola is the more finely ground type of flour. That's really what you want for what we're going to be doing today. Specifically, you want something that's called semola rimacinato. So if I kind of zoom in here, you can hopefully read that. This is a brand that's fairly common in the United States. You can find it at Italian specialty stores. If not, you can definitely find it online. So again, what you want is what's called semola rimacinata, which means reground or twice ground, meaning that it's very, very finely ground. Essentially dust. That's really what you want. That, and then I'm also just using plain white flour. So the quantities I'm using today are really more of a suggestion, which I know a lot of people can find frustrating. If you've ever seen a recipe in an Italian cookbook, usually it lists the ingredients, and then in terms of the quantity, it'll just have the letters QB, which stands for quanto basta, or however much you need, which again can be a bit infuriating. But again, this is something that I learned from my grandmother. When people make these sort of very kind of humble things at home, they're not necessarily measuring every single ingredient, to precise. A lot of this stuff is really, it's something that you learn through repetition. It's something that you just learn by doing, through touch, through feel, and which again might sound intimidating or difficult, but you really can't mess it up. If you do somehow find a way to mess it up, you can just start over again. Again, we're just using flour and water here. Maybe not even, $10 worth of ingredients, probably not even that much. So in terms of quantities, I am using, and also to make this even more authentic and difficult, I am using metric system because in Italy they use the metric system. So I'm starting off with 500 grams of semola rimacinata and 100 grams of just plain white flour. So the method by which I'm going to be doing this is a method you may have seen before. It's very common when it comes to making pasta by hand. It's sometimes called the grandma method, the nonna method, the volcano method. There's lots of different ways to call it. Basically, you're just going to make a mound with a flour. So first, I'm going to put out the semola, excuse me. See, even I get it wrong sometimes. The semola. Just going to make a big mound here. And then I'm just going to then sprinkle the white flour over that. Okay. And these two things are going to get mixed up eventually, so don't worry about them being perfectly mixed right now. And then what you do is you just make a little hole in the middle. Okay. And I have about 2 cups of just plain tap water here, room temperature. And I'm probably not going to use all of this. Again, it's a sort of thing that you just kind of have to go by feel. So I can't really give you an exact amount, which again, might be a little confusing, a little bit frustrating, but stick with me here. So we're just gonna start by pouring in a little bit of water in the middle, right? Just a little bit, maybe a 1/4 cup. And then you just start moving your hands around in the middle. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just taking a little bit of water from the edges, flour from the edges, and working it into that water in the middle. And I'm kind of forming a paste here, okay? And you're just gonna kind of keep going like that, basically until we've incorporated all of the flour into that water. And basically, as I continue to do this, like I said, first it's gonna be a little bit of a paste, and then eventually it will come together into a sort of shaggy ball that I'm then going to knead. So you might be wondering why this kind of pasta doesn't have eggs. So the reason for that is traditionally southern Italy is the poorer region of Italy, whereas the north is traditionally the more wealthy region. It's the capital of finance, industry, whereas the South is has traditionally, historically been more of an agricultural society, farmers. And so the South has traditionally been a more humble region, a poorer region, and as a result, they've had to sort of make do with less, as you will. The North, where egg pasta is more common, makes sense because eggs cost money. Eggs cost more money than just flour and water. So they were able to afford that in the North, whereas in the South, they did not. So they had to make do with just flour and water. And so that's how these sorts of recipes developed over time. There's even a term for it, which is you've maybe heard or seen at restaurants. It's actually used now in a number of fancier, sort of higher end restaurants that take inspiration from what's called cucina povera, which just literally translates to poor kitchen. And that is really the term that was given or has been given to food from southern Italy to denote the fact that it came out of a tradition of poverty and people making do with less, making the most of what they could with what they had. And so again, I'm just continuing to, this doesn't look like much right now, I know, but it will eventually come together, I promise. A little bit more water here. And again, I'm trying to be as neat as I can here, but it can get a little messy. So have a towel nearby. Okay. So the paste at this point is sort of starting to come together into a bit of a ball here. And I forgot to mention that in addition to the actual semola that we're using for the pasta, you want to have a little bit of extra, because what we're going to use it once we roll out the pasta, and we're going to use it to help make sure that it doesn't stick to the table. Traditionally, again, if you were doing this in Italy, I mean, some people do it on their table like this, but a lot of people also have a piece of wood, sort of rectangular shaped piece of wood that they use. Almost everybody in Italy, in southern Italy, has this little rectangular piece of wood, whether they use it, that often or not. Almost everybody has this, and this little piece of rectangular wood is used specifically for kneading pasta. And the idea is that over time, all of the kneading and all of the flour being worked into the dough, it creates a sort of a patina, if you will, that kind of seasons the wood in a way and supposedly makes it easier or better to work with. So you can already see that this is coming together into, again, like I said, a bit of a shaggy ball. And the reason I'm just a little bit of water at a time, because you can't take water away from the dough. But if it's too dry, you can always add a little bit more water. So that's why I just typically start with a little bit less water. And again, so this is all kind of coming together now. A little bit here, bit by bit, okay? And it is kind of shaggy, like I was saying, but what we're gonna do is we're going to knead it. And by kneading it, also what I'm also doing here a little bit, if you can see, is I'm just there's still some stray bits of flour and water, and I'm just kind of bringing the dough across to pick up those little extra bits of dry flour. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm kneading, and this is the same exact kneading motion you would do if you ever made any kind of dough, pie crust. It's exactly the same thing. So basically what you're doing is you're taking the palm of your hand and you're pushing in, right? And then what I do is I turn the dough towards myself, and then again, I push it again, and then I fold it over. You can turn it, push it, and you just kind of keep doing that. Pushing it with the palm of your hand here, pushing it, then turning it, pushing it, then you fold in the sides. I'm just trying to, again, work it into one big even mass here. And eventually you might be asking, how do you know when the dough is ready? So it's, like I said, it's very might not be super easy to see, but it is kind of shaggy right now. And with the kneading, eventually what's going to happen is it's going to become smooth. Once the dough is smooth, that's when you'll know it's done. So I'm actually going to sprinkle a little bit of that extra semola, on the table here, just to help things from not sticking. There's also some kind of remnants of flour here. We'll pick that up, not a problem. So at this point, the dough is pretty solid. It's come together. So I don't need any more water. Like I said, there's a little bit left here. I didn't end up using all of it. So maybe, about a cup and 3/4, thereabouts, probably what I ended up using. So we're gonna knead. This will probably take a few minutes here. Because like I said, you wanna make sure that the dough is smooth. Okay. And the good thing about this kind of pasta, like I was saying, is that the kind of wheat that it's made from, durum wheat, is a very hard wheat. You can't, you can't mess this up. You can't break this pasta. If a piece breaks off, you just take it and you just basically can just reattach it and just keep going. It's very sturdy. It's a very flexible, very tough. That's why it's been used for, who knows, hundreds of years at this point, probably, to make this kind of pasta. Okay, so I think we're almost getting there. Like I said, this will take, maybe 5 or 10 minutes of kneading. And have, again, a little bit of extra semola ready to go so that you can sprinkle a little bit on there, make sure that things don't stick. We're also going to use, I think I already said this, but have some of that extra semola later when we're cutting and shaping the dough into the pasta, and we're going to sprinkle it onto a sheet pan to make sure that it doesn't stick. So I'm almost to that point. It's getting pretty smooth. Maybe just a few more minutes. If you've been in lockdown, trying not to go out or do much of anything, and especially maybe not exercising, if you're a person like myself who used to or was used to going to the gym, you haven't gotten much exercise, this is a good little bit of upper body workout. So you can get a little bit of a sweat on from doing this. Okay, just keep kneading and kneading, and we're just about there. Yeah, looking pretty smooth. Okay, maybe just a little bit more. That will be there. Okay. Okay. All right, so I think we are pretty much ready to go. So at this point, you can just shape the dough into a rough ball. And then what I'm going to do is try and clean off my hands a little bit here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is just wrap the dough in regular old plastic wrap, and I'm gonna let it rest for a half hour. What that does is lets the dough relax a bit, helps the gluten develop in the dough, which makes it easier to stretch out, makes it more elastic. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this, let this hang out for a half hour, and then I will come back and then I will show you how to actually shape the dough into the orecchiette and the cavatelli.